Welcome to Crosstalk Solutions. My name's Chris, and today we're going to be taking a look at the highly anticipated UDR, or UniFi Dream Router. Now, what is this device? Essentially, this is kind of like a gateway into UniFi, is the way that I think of it, or kind of a all-in-one combo device really made for home users or prosumers. The UDR has an MSRP of $199, but a lot of people watching this were lucky enough to get one when it was in the early access store, and it was priced at, I think it was $79. When they did move it to GA, they upped the price to $199. So let's talk about this device. The UniFi Dream Router features Wi-Fi 6. So first and foremost, it is a router slash firewall with an integrated access point, Wi-Fi 6, 4x4 multi-user MIMO, which is definitely sufficient for most home user environments. But being that it's UniFi, you also have the ability to add supplementary access points as well. It does have a UniFi controller on board. All right, let's get it out of the box here. Ooh, there we go. Ow, what the hell, man? In addition to the 4x4 multi-user MIMO access point right on top here, this device also features a 4-port switch. So you've got a WAN in, and then you've got a 4-port switch. Two of the ports on this 4-port switch provide 802.3 AF PoE power. So if you wanted to power up a surveillance camera or a voice over IP phone or something like that, you've got two PoE powered ports on the back. Also on the back we have where our power cable plugs in, as well as a micro SD card slot. This device also has a 128 gigabyte internal storage card for UniFi Protect surveillance. But if you want to expand that internal storage, you do get this micro SD card right here, and then you can pop in 256 or 512, whatever they make in micro SD. I will say, however, though, that micro SD storage is really not ideal for a surveillance system. So I wouldn't rely too heavily on this, maybe 1 or 2 cameras, but if you're going to want to set up a for real surveillance environment, you would be much better suited getting something like the UNVR, where you can use actual 3.5-inch hard drives instead of SD card storage. On the bottom of the device we have a button for factory resetting, and then we have this 0.96-inch LCM display screen right on the front for network and connection monitoring. The CPU of the UDR is an Intel dual-core Cortex-A53 running at 1.35 gigahertz, and it also features 2 gigs of RAM. This is the device that's meant to be used indoors. The operating temperatures of the UDR are -10 to 45 degrees Celsius, which is 14 to 113 degrees Fahrenheit. Or in other words, inside most temperature-controlled environments, this thing is going to be just fine. Okay, let's see what else is in the box here. So we've got our quick start guide, we've got a power cable, and that's it. I'm gonna go ahead and get this thing plugged in so that we can start the initial setup of the UDR. And for the initial setup, this device can be managed either through Ethernet by plugging into one of these ports, the LAN ports on the back, or you can set it up via Bluetooth using the UniFi app. So I've got that plugged in. I've also got a Starlink connection right here that I'm going to plug into the WAN port. And then we're probably just going to set it up using Bluetooth and the UniFi app. That's usually the easiest way to get one of these things online. And then I will switch over to the browser-based GUI version of this device once it has been adopted. Initial boot up of the UDR took about 2 minutes, where it had a percentage counter going up on the display screen, and eventually it said it was ready for setup. It also said that the default IP address is 192.168.1.1, just like every other network device in the entire world upon initial factory default settings. So if you wanted to connect to this with Ethernet, just plug into one of the Ethernet ports on the back, set your own device to something in the 192.168.1.x network. In fact, it probably has DHCP by default, although I have not tested that. And then you just want to open a GUI browser to 192.168.1.1, and it should go through an initial setup wizard. For our purposes, I'm going to be using the UniFi Network app to get this thing adopted, and right off the bat, we can see one device found. It is connected over Bluetooth, and it's got a 7-minute and 12-second uptime. So we're going to click Setup. We can see the name of the device by default is Dream Router. I'm just going to take that default, and then we can give it an SSID for the default wireless network. And I'm just going to call it UDR test. I'm going to give it a super strong password of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to say next. Looks like it's running a speed test. Now I have Starlink plugged in as the WAN connection on this device, so I should be getting, it looks like about 120 by 12 up. So that's going to vary from time to time. I actually did a speed test earlier and got about 190 by 20, but you know, Starlink varies quite a bit from speed test to speed test. All right, so we're going to say next, and it says setting up, about 15 seconds left, while it is giving us some advertisements about the features and benefits of UniFi Network. And while it's doing this, the LED ring around the top of the device is pulsing blue, whereas it was solid white when it's ready for adoption. While it's adopting, it is pulsing blue. There we go, we got a check mark. And now it is updating the firmware automatically, so that's great. Okay, really super easy to set this thing up. I'm gonna let it go ahead and update the firmware. It says about 6 minutes left to do that, and I'm gonna turn off the camera and we will come back once this device has finished updating and is ready for us to start actually playing around with it. The UDR has finished updating, and I connected my computer over to one of the LAN ports and connected to the interface of the UDR on 192.168.1.1. Here is what the interface looks like. I've also connected up a couple of cameras, and this is pretty interesting. In the top left-hand corner here, we can actually see a picture representation of what's plugged in. So I've got power, WAN connection, and then the two cameras in the two PoE ports, one empty port, and then my computer's plugged into the top LAN port right up here. After updating, and as of the recording of this video, we are UniFi OS version 2.4.10. So let's take a quick look around here. Here we can see the Dream Router, or as I've named it, Steam Trouter, and a couple of the cameras that are connected. I don't really have any other clients connected besides my own computer. If you click on floor plan, you can upload a floor plan of your home or small business, and you can actually add access points and see the coverage. So you can see if I hover over the Dream Router, it will show you the coverage. This is the 2.4 gigahertz coverage. I can also flip it to 5 gigahertz coverage, and you would want to upload and scale a floor plan of your own environment in order for this to be much more accurate. If we click on users, we can add users to the UniFi OS backend, which allows us to determine, what those users can do in whichever applications we have installed. And then if I come over here to settings, you'll notice that network and protect are installed and up to date, but access and talk, while they're in here, they're not actually installed. And there's a note here that says the UDR can run up to 2 applications simultaneously. So most often you would be running UniFi Network, and then you can choose between Protect, Access, or Talk, depending on what you actually need, but you can only have 2 of those in total. Down here we have settings for whether or not we want to automatically update the device. I just left the defaults, which is automatically update both UniFi OS as well as the applications. Now, let me caveat that. If I was running this in production, either for my home network or for a small business, I would probably not allow UniFi to do the updates. I would want to control that myself and run them manually as I am actually ready to receive those updates. And if we click on System, we can see a number of settings, including whether we want to enable remote access. That's going to allow us to connect to this device from anywhere by going to unifi.ui.com and using our Ubiquiti single sign-on login information. Just keep in mind, if you are doing remote access and you're looking at something like Protect and you want to download the Protect footage from a remote location, that download's going to be really slow versus if you're connecting to it locally on the LAN. Then we have some options for the cloud config backup, time zone, and then some general controls such as restarting, turning off, factory resetting, etc. Notifications allows us to determine how and when we want to be notified about events in the applications that are installed. Now I'm just just leaving these default. However, if you guys are interested in a full setup of UniFi OS, I did do a complete series, I think it's like a 13-part series or something, on setting up the Dream Machine Pro, and a lot of those same exact concepts translate over to the UDR. So go through that whole series start to finish, and we talk about how to set absolutely everything up. UniFi Network, UniFi Protect, all of the little ins and outs and settings in much greater detail than I'm covering in this video. Clicking on storage, we can see that I do have an SD card inserted into the UDR. Here's the interesting thing about the SD card. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the minimum SD card you can input is 128 gigs. Now keep in mind that the UDR has 128 gigs worth of storage already on the device built in. So putting in a 128 gig micro SD card doesn't really do you a whole lot of good, because you're choosing one or the other. You don't get to combine those two different sets of storage. You don't get like 256 gigs when you put in a 128 gig micro SD card. You only get to use the micro SD card. So when you have micro SD inserted, that is now the default storage location for UniFi Protect, and the onboard storage is not used for UniFi Protect. So putting in a 128 gig micro SD card really isn't, you want to go bigger than that, right? Because if you're only going to do 128 gigs, might as well just use the onboard storage, which is the same size. But I got a question on Twitter: how large a micro SD card can you add in this device? And to be honest, I actually don't know the upper limits, although I do know that you can buy micro SD cards up to, I believe, 1 terabyte in size. So I'm going to assume that that is the maximum, 1 terabyte. I don't see why you wouldn't be able to do that, but if you guys know better, please put that in the comments below. Finally, we can click on About This Console, and we can get some sort of general information about the device itself. All right, so let's go back to the dashboard, and we're going to hop into UniFi Network first. And from the dashboard here, we can see that I have, one total access point. I'm just using the onboard access point for the UDR. And I can see some ping times to various services such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter. I can also run speed tests if I want. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. And we can see that right now, Starlink is giving me 32 by 21 or so. Now, I'm currently connecting up my phone to the UDR test SSID that I created during the initial setup wizard. I have connected. We should now see a client in here. Client devices, here we go. So we can see my phone here, and it is 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi 6. Let me click on the actual phone and see if I can't get it to pull the image. There we go. I added the iPhone image. And let's go ahead and run a speed test from my iPhone through the UDR. And keep in mind, I'm right next to it. And the speed test out to the internet might not be spectacular because, as you saw, the Starlink connection isn't exactly spectacular. But we're going to try it anyways here. All right, so not terrible. I ended up with 248 by 19.5, which is interesting because the speed test that I'm running from within the UniFi Network GUI has been a lot lower than any test that I've done from the phone connected across. Now, if I come over here to Settings and then click on Firewall and Security, we can see that Threat Management, that's intrusion prevention, is completely disabled. So I'm going to go ahead and say Detect and Block. So Detect Only is IDS, Intrusion Detection. Detect and Block is IPS, Intrusion Prevention. And then we're going to say, we're going to put it on High, and we're going to apply those changes. And I want to run a speed test again and just kind of see what the difference is in speed. Now, keeping in mind that when you have IDS, IPS enabled on UniFi, one device doing a speed test is not a really great test of how much your bandwidth might be diminished by enabling those features. It's really all of your client devices together passing traffic simultaneously that is really going to be hammering on the CPU and RAM of the UDR, and when you have IPS enabled. They do have a note here that says enabling threat management may reduce maximum throughput speeds, but let's see what we get when we run that same speed test again, just about 2 minutes after I ran the last one. All right, that time we got 108 by 14. So it definitely dropped it by more than 50%. Let me run it again, though. Again, this is all completely anecdotal because it's just one device testing out over Starlink, and Starlink is flaky in terms of the speeds that you get anyways. But we're going to do one more test here, and then I'm going to turn IPS off again, and we'll do a fourth speed test and just sort of see if we can get any sort of pattern going here. All right, so this time the speed test was 66 by 10. That's the worst one so far. All right, we're going to save that. Now, let me turn off IPS. We're just going to say off and apply those changes. We'll give it a minute to provision, and then we will try another speed test and see if the speeds go way back up over, close to 200 or over 200 megabits like that first speed test we did. Okay, here we go, trying again. And this time we got 140 by 10. So let me just do one last speed test just for kicks to see what we get here. And the last speed test got us 153 by 16.7. Yeah, tough to really tell. I mean, we know that the intrusion detection and intrusion prevention does affect total throughput of the device. But again, this is a really shabby test environment, right? First of all, I got Starlink, which has crazy variances in speed tests, even in perfect environments. And then we're also fiddling with enabling and disabling that IPS. So it's really hard to judge. If you guys have better speed tests than what I'm able to pull off here, put those down in the comments below. I'd like to see some real world results for the UDR. One of the nice things about this device for home users is it is a nice sort of gateway into UniFi products, meaning that it's a $199 device that is sort of all-encompassing. It has everything you need to run a UniFi network, and then you can expand upon that UniFi network later if you want to. So if you want to add switches or access points, maybe it covers your house great, but you have a shed in the backyard or in the garage somewhere you want to have an extra access point. This would allow you to do that with relatively low cost of entry as opposed to some of the other UniFi solutions that are out there. All right, now we're going to switch over to UniFi Protect. And here we can see I have that 125 gig card. It's a 128 gig card. It formatted down to 125 gigs. And we can see that since I've had it up for the past 3 hours, I've already used 21% of the space. Now here's something interesting. If you go into UniFi devices, we look at one of our cameras. So say the G4 Dome camera here. If we go to recording mode, it does have always on recording. However, if I was going to be running this with always on recording, I really would not have that much history. I mean, you're talking about 2 cameras is going to get you about 35 or 40 hours worth of history at 1080p. So it's really not spectacular. What I would do is put it on detections only and then set your detection settings so that, say, it's 1 second of motion needed to trigger detection, but then record a good 5 seconds before and after the detection. So this way any movement that's captured on the cameras will turn into a detection and you'll have a little bit of buffer space on either side of that recording, rather than keeping recording always on and just continuously hammering on your micro SD card, which isn't really made for that type of use. So I'm going to say detections only for both of these cameras. Settings, recording mode, detections, and then we will say detection record settings, 5 seconds on either end. So hopefully this will make our micro SD card last a little bit longer, but honestly, it is only a 128 gig micro SD card. The better thing would be just to pull out that micro SD card. If I only need 128 gigs of storage, just use the internal storage. Or if you want a lot more storage, buy a larger micro SD card and pop it in there. Just be aware that micro SD cards aren't really for surveillance systems. You can also see right here, estimated storage capacity is 1 day, 5 hours, 41 minutes. That's actually lower than what I said. I said it was about 35 to 40 hours. This is estimating it's about 20, almost 30 hours. So again, not a lot of onboard storage by default. I had someone ask me on Twitter, how many cameras does the UDR support? And to me, it's not a question of how many cameras does it support, it's a question of how many cameras should you have on this device given the low amount of capacity in terms of hard drive storage. And yeah, I mean, unless you're popping in a 1 terabyte micro SD card, you don't have a lot of space. You don't have a lot of history to go back and look at recordings. So if you were away for a weekend and you come back on Monday and wanted to see something that happened on Friday, there's a chance that you might miss it, unless, as I said, you're doing detection-only recording, which then you probably can stretch out the amount of space and utilize that space a bit better. All right, so other than the space considerations, you know, Protect is Protect. There's really not too much more to say about it. If you want to see a full video or a full tutorial series on how I set up UniFi Protect, I've done a number of videos on that subject. You can go back through my history and just search Protect and you'll absolutely find stuff. What I do want to cover are some of the questions that I received on Twitter when I asked if people had questions about the UDR. One of the first questions was, can Protect be disabled or turned off? And absolutely. So if you come over here to the UniFi OS, click on Updates, you see UniFi Protect right here. You can hit these 3 dots and you can either just stop it to turn it off or completely uninstall it. You would want to uninstall it if you're going to install either Access or Talk, since you can only have up to 2 of the UniFi applications running on the UDR simultaneously. Another person said, how many clients would I recommend throwing at the UDR if you had an additional 3 UAP6 light access points? So basically saying 4 total access points. And again, that's a really tough question to answer because there is no answer to that question because it depends on the type of clients, how much traffic they're pushing, and all that sort of stuff. What I will say to answer that question is, number one, adding an extra 3 UAP6 light access points is a lot, right? Usually in a home environment or a small business environment, that's going to be way too many access points. What I will say is, for home or small business use, normal usage is what I would throw at this thing. Right? If you're getting up to a point where you have multi-hundreds of clients, like a ton of IoT devices or a lot of people that are connecting with their, devices, their PCs and their phones and their tablets, and you're getting up to that sort of 100, 200, 300 client devices connected, this is probably not the solution that you want to go with. You're going to want to go with something more robust that can handle that amount of clients, where the throughput and the CPU and RAM of the device is sufficient to handle that amount of clients. This is designed for, I would say, vanilla standard home use. In fact, what I'm going to do with this router when I'm done here setting it up is I'm going to take it over to my mother-in-law's house, who basically is running off just the wireless that her ISP gave her. So we're going to swap out her house so that I can use this in a more production environment and keep an eye on it and see how it functions in a sort of normal vanilla home situation. Another question that I received was, can you teleport to the UDR? And you absolutely can. So if I come over here to network, we can see we have teleport and VPN. So you can absolutely do the teleport 0 configuration remote access. That does work with the UDR. Finally, the last question that I received on Twitter, has it ever crashed? All right, so in my testing for the past, day and a half that I've been playing with the UDR, it has not crashed on me one time. Again, your mileage may vary, but for me, anecdotally, it has been perfectly fine. All right, so there you go. A look at the UniFi Dream Router, $199. What do you guys think about this device? Is this something that you would be running in your own home? Let me know down in the comments below. And I will reiterate one more time, if you're looking for a full setup tutorial series on UniFi OS, check out my UDM Pro Complete Setup tutorial series. It's like a 13-part series where I go through all of this stuff in grave detail, and you can see how I set everything up start to finish. All right, there you have it. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos like this, please click subscribe. My name's Chris with Crosstalk Solutions, and thank you so much for watching. Ow! What the hell, man? That would really hurt. Try not to get me with the corners. The corners hurt. Let's do it again. You like this, don't you? All right.
This is the only time that you will allow me to throw a box at your head.
All right, I got a straight face. All right, let's do one more. I think we got it. What?
You're bleeding.
Oh. let me get the things I do for stupid YouTube.